In this video, I'm going to give you my honest review of Kenna Bridge of Spirits. Subscribe to the Linus Wilson channel where we give you the secret to crush RPG games. So I got a review copy of Kenna Bridge of Spirits. I was somewhat skeptical going in and probably would not have tried out the game without a review copy. I was skeptical that, number one, it was aimed at a younger audience than me, and that I don't think was too bad. I was also skeptical that they said it was a 9-hour campaign, and paying $40 or $50 for the deluxe edition for a 9-hour campaign seemed pretty ridiculous to me. So I've got hundreds of hours in Valhalla, which is going for about $25. They kept on adding content after that. I didn't think Kenna was going to be that much more exciting than Valhalla, and so I definitely didn't think it was worth the $40. The other problem that just going into it was that it's not an open world, which basically puts it back as a game, at least 7 years, but probably about 10 years, right? We're talking about Skyrim was an open world, right? That was over 10 years ago. So it's a very old style of game to begin with. So which may be okay for Nintendo fans, but for PS5, PS4, PC fans, that seems like a throwback to an earlier era. But maybe if they implement it really well, maybe it's you could justify it if money is no object. And so, in that sense, I still felt that the reviews coming out of the critics was very, very high. So, an 85 review score. I think if you kind of compare Kenna to, like, a gymnastics competition you'll see in the Olympics, right? They say, or a diving competition. They'll say, hey, this routine has a maximum score of 9 out of 10. Or this jump has a maximum score out of 8 out of 10. And I think if you objectively look at what Kenna is trying to achieve, Kenna Bridge of Spirits, it has a maximum score of 7 out of 10. It's not, there's no way it can be a 90 game, right? If Ghost of Tsushima is a 90 game, right? Ghost of Tsushima is an open world, right? It's a much bigger game. It's not to compare Kenna with Ghost of Tsushima, which does a lot more, is not fair to Ghost of Tsushima and all the other AAA games out there. But maybe it's implemented well. So I think it started out really slowly. There was no you start out and you don't really know what's going on. It just seems like you're doing some sort of puzzles. Not sure why. You have a little bit of combat. Eventually you get to the village and at least there is some story element to it. But before that, you just get this snippet from a boss fight, and it doesn't really, without the pre-release materials, you don't really know what's going on, and you have no reason to want to go on, right? There's no compelling reason why Kenna is going on, right? And what she is actually doing, right? But it is, the art is very bright and colorful, and the rots are cute. But I don't think those are the biggest issues that it's not an open world. I think the art is fine. The gameplay at the beginning seemed okay. The combat seemed okay, except it became painfully obvious that enemies were restricted to a certain area. And all enemy encounters had an arena style element to them, even if the arena was not closed off. Sometimes the enemies would just disappear and you'd have to go back and reset the enemies, right? That the enemies could not move from their place. So one way they got around it was they would put you in an arena, which is kind of a very highly artificial environment. So if you're used to playing open world games, the enemies can follow you wherever they want, right? Maybe they don't choose to follow you, but they don't disappear if they go beyond their area, right? And I think that's a weakness of the combat within Kenna. That I think the other thing was I was just shocked by how few buttons they actually used on the controller, right? There were so few buttons that actually had a purpose on the controller. They didn't even bother with the D-pad. There were quite a lot of things that they just didn't do but maybe they were going to add that later. And so what really broke the game for me was that I realized that the saves do not save your progression. So you can do a manual save and it will not save you to your latest spot, even when you're out of combat. It will save you to the beginning of a parkour. So I was on Roos's Mountain, right? And first part, to get to the fast travel point, the warp, right? If you go back, if you make progression in your parkour, save that, then lose the progression by taking a bad jump, and then you reload to the beginning of Roos's Mountain. And the same thing is true is once you get to the first fast travel on Roos's Mountain, that if you reload at any point, it takes you back to the first fast travel at Roos's Mountain. So let's say you have 10 jumps that are difficult that you potentially could reset. You're always resetting back to the beginning of the parkour. So if your 10th jump is difficult, well, you have to do the previous 9 jumps to get back to that and practice the 10th. So for instance, there was one jump that I thought was really difficult. I did it and I was like, I want to do that again. Could not do that. I made the mistake of reloading, and I reloaded to the beginning of the parkour sequence and had 9 other jumps to get to that 10th jump. Well, I mean, that's not a very enjoyable way to play a game. That's a very frustrating way to play a game. So Assassin's Creed released free content within their Valhalla game for these mastery challenges that work just like that. That if you want to do the 10th hurdle within the challenge, you have to do the first 9. There's no saving within it, right? That was the least popular part of that game, right? So like 1 in 1,000 players completed those mastery challenges at some point during the summer, 3 months after it was released. It was not what people wanted, right? And to repeat the same jumps that you've done over and over and over again just to progress the story. This is not for collectibles or not for getting some rot hat or something. This is to progress the story and continue on with the story. So that's why I'm not recommending Kenna Bridge of Spirits. I don't think it's worth the money. I think it's a game that should have been made 10 years ago. And it's a very frustrating game. It's not an enjoyable game. As someone who really likes story-driven RPGs, and that was what Kenna was advertised as, I think Kenna's a real step back even from like Ghost of Tsushima, which had very, very little choice within the story. There was at the end you had a choice, but everything else was an objective. Whereas there were some choices in Assassin's Creed, a lot of choices within Cyberpunk 2077 and The Witcher 3, but there aren't even dialogue options within Kenna, right? You just click to get them to continue the dialogue, right? So playing through Roos's Mountain, I did not get a single dialogue option for Kenna, right? Which does not even give you the illusion of choice. So my overall rating for Kenna Bridge of Spirits is 3 out of 10. I think it's a bad value. It's a poor game. I give it a D. I actually would recommend Godfall over Kenna Bridge of Spirits as one of the PlayStation exclusives, and I think the fact that it's been promoted so much by Sony reflects the fact that Sony's winter 2021 lineup or holiday 2021 lineup is so weak. Subscribe to the Linus Wilson channel. We give you the secrets to crush open world RPGs.